This is our first week of my favorite Jesus series. We're going to look at different Jesuses people latch onto. Okay? And you can see that our logo is a hodgepodge of kind of different versions. You've got like Jesus holding a lamb, white Jesus, you've got an angry, Jesus there. You've got blue-eyed Jesus, blonde hair.
Where's Santa Jesus?
You've got Catholic Jesuses. You've got Jesus action figure over there. All right. So
you skip one.
I'm not calling them all out.
Why not?
I'm just saying examples. Okay?
Hey.
All right. So the point of this is. The whole reason.
No, be quiet. Jesus. He's angry.
Yeah, angry Jesus is about to come out. Alright, the whole reason, Sarah and Zoe, that we're doing this series is because most of the time, and this is especially true just in American culture in general and in the West, people kind of latch onto one aspect or characteristic of Jesus, and then that kind of becomes Jesus' whole identity to them. Alright? And this can unintentionally kind of happen to us. Instead of seeing Jesus for everything that he is, who he really is, we kind of only look at a certain Jesus from a certain perspective, or we just focus in on one characteristic. So tonight, we're going to focus on angry Jesus. Alright, now there is a segment of our population that loves angry Jesus. Okay? They just love it when they can make Jesus be against anything. Alright? And to them, Jesus is always against people. He's not really for people, and he serves their agenda, and he's always yelling at somebody, calling somebody out, telling somebody they're a horrible sinner, telling somebody they're not good enough, throwing people in hell. They just love this Jesus. Maybe you know some people like that. Maybe some people like that in your family. Maybe you're one of those people. You never know. Alright, so we are going to look at some passages where Jesus shows anger and kind of how people see, oh yeah, angry Jesus. Alright, so the first one is in Matthew chapter 21, verses 18 and 19. This is probably my favorite angry Jesus passage. Okay? Because it's kind of like, what? And it's awesome. So, we're in Matthew chapter 21, verses 18 and 19. What's happened is this is like the last week of Jesus' ministry, okay? This is it. This last week he was coming into Jerusalem. He did the whole I'm riding on a donkey. People are going crazy kind of thing. And Jesus, picking up in verse 18, it says, in the morning as Jesus was returning to Jerusalem, he was hungry. And he noticed a fig tree beside the road. He went over to see if there were any figs, but there were only leaves. Then he said to it, may you never bear fruit again. And immediately the fig tree withered up. Yeah! Call out that fig tree.
Yeah.
Right? You ain't got nothing for me? You're dead, son. And so
Someone really wanted some figs.
Jesus, angry Jesus right there. Okay? Alright, so now we're going to a new angry Jesus passage in John chapter 2. Go to John chapter 2. Now we're transitioning to the beginning of Jesus' public ministry, okay? The very beginning. John chapter 2, Jesus is just starting out his public ministry. It's Passover. Okay? And picking up in verse 13, it says, it was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration, so Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple area, he saw merchants selling cattle, sheep, and doves for sacrifices. He also saw dealers at the tables exchanging foreign money. Jesus made a whip from some ropes and chased them all out of the temple. He drove out the sheep, cattle, and scattered the money changers' coins over the floor and turned over their tables. Then going over to the people who sold doves, he told them, get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace. Y'all remember when we had the bake sale last year? Okay, so this would be like Jesus rolling up into our bake sale, flipping the table over, grabbing cookies and like throwing them at people, going into the sanctuary with a whip, like Indiana Jones, and just like going crazy and yelling. Okay?
Was he hitting us?
That's the scene. Okay? And imagine the sanctuary is also full of livestock, right? And so he's like making them stampede out the doors. So it's like math chaos, crazy town. All right? So people look at that and they're like, man, angry Jesus, right? So he just went up there. He made a whip. He didn't just go in and be like, can you please leave? He made a whip. Okay? That's pretty hardcore. That's pretty awesome. Okay? All right. Our last angry Jesus passage, and this is probably one of the most famous ones I'm talking about just with words. In Matthew 23, okay, Jesus, pretty much through the whole chapter, pronounces these woes. He says, woe to you. If some of you got older Bible translations, it's going to have that in there. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. All right, so we're just going to look at how many times he says this. So if you start in verse 13, Jesus says, in my modern translation, it says, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, you Pharisees, hypocrites. Okay? And then if we go to verse 15, it says, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and Pharisees, hypocrites. Verse 16, blind guides, what sorrow awaits you. All right? Verse 17, blind fools. Okay? If we skip down to verse 23, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, you hypocrites. All right? So he's just going through, and he's basically calling them out on all the crap. All right, he's saying, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here. You're hypocrites, you're blind, trying to lead people. You've got a horrible future inside because you are just doing everything wrong. All right, and that's really the whole theme of Matthew chapter 23. Is people say, look at these, and they're like, look, angry Jesus. Jesus is just mad. God isn't mad. He's against. He's calling these people out. And they get kind of stuck on Jesus is just kind of always angry. All right? And so before we kind of get into these passages and really look at, is Jesus just mad at everybody or what's actually really going on, I thought it might be nice to just kind of do a heart check and say, how do you know if you heart angry Jesus? So you can draw a little heart in the listening guide in that space there. Because that's fun, right? How do you know if you heart angry Jesus? You can be like, hey, Jesus.
What are some Bibles not in verse 14?
Some of the, that is an excellent question. All right, one of the things that happened, this is for free, guys. This is why we don't use the King James Version of the Bible anymore. See, in between the translation of the King James, which was first translated in 1611, and there are tons of updates. So even people who use it don't use the original. All right, but the last one was updated in like 1750s. Right? Okay. In between the 1700s and now, we've made some pretty significant finds in biblical manuscripts. Okay. So our manuscript database has greatly increased. Just like Dead Sea Scrolls. All right, that's the most prominent. So what that means is we have a greater diversity of manuscripts to translate the Bible from, the original languages. And so verse 14, the reason some translations don't put it in there, or the reason it might be in brackets in yours, is because some of the manuscripts don't contain that verse. And some of them do. And so there is, it might be the case that wasn't a part of the original autograph. That when Matthew sat down and wrote Matthew, that verse wasn't in there, and that it was maybe part of the Jesus tradition and it got added in later, or for whatever reason. So that's why whenever you see a verse in brackets, or you see a verse that's missing, the numbers, it's not a typo, it's because that's the case. Some manuscripts have it, some don't. But usually if they leave it out, it's the oldest manuscripts don't contain the verse. That's right. But either way, it's completely in line with the text, and Luke has that verse in there. So it's not like anything crazy. So it really doesn't affect the meaning of the passage or affect any kind of Christian theology. That is an excellent question, Jason. Thank you for asking. All right. So we're just going to do a couple things. How do you know if you heart angry Jesus? You're all about the angry Jesus. All right. So the first thing is you only read passages where Jesus is yelling at people. Okay, if you are only reading passages where Jesus is yelling at people, so you sit down and have your quiet time, you're like, I'm going to do some Devo time, and you're like reading a verse where it's like, Jesus loves, and you're like, oh no, where's Matthew chapter 23? Yeah. I'm just going to read that one. You know, where's that whip story again? That's pretty awesome. Or maybe you just want to go to the Old Testament and read about all the battles and all the crazy stuff that happened back there. All right, so you're probably in love with angry Jesus if those are the only parts of the Bible you want to read. All right, so if that's you, there's probably something going on there. All right, so the second thing. You love to be against stuff and or people. Okay? You love to be against stuff and or people. Just think about kind of where you generally fall among issues. And think about if you're against things more than you're for things. Right? So, for example, okay, if you're only against abortion, but you're not for adoption, there's an issue. Right? Okay? If you are only against profanity, but you're not for using encouraging words, there's an issue there. Right? Is it starting to make sense a little bit? Another example. If you're only against people who abuse their authority, so maybe like a teacher who's abusing their authority, or like maybe a parent who's coming on too strong, but you're not also for submitting to legitimate authority, there's an issue there. All right? And so a lot of times, especially in like our hyper-politicized evangelical Southern culture, it's so easy to just be against stuff all the time. But as Christians, we should be for things, not just against things. Okay? We should be for things, not just against things. So, like sometimes we need to take a stand and be like, yeah, that's not right. But we need to make sure that we're being for the right thing. And that's why we're against the wrong thing, because we're for the right thing, not just we want to stand up and be like, you're wrong. Okay? So, you might be in love with angry Jesus if you're just against stuff. You're just against people all the time. Does that one make sense? Yeah? Checking? All right, third one. You can't separate people from their issues. You can't separate people from their issues. This is a big one. Just the easiest example to pull from is same-sex marriage. Okay? As Christians, of course, we look to the Bible to define what is and what is not marriage, right? But we have to realize at the same time that while we might define marriage one way, even if someone disagrees with us, we're still supposed to be for the person, right? That person is not their issue. People are way more complex than that, right? If you can't just identify somebody solely based on their sexual preferences, right? There's so many more aspects that make up our identity. And so it's easy to just be against people because we're against an issue they might have. But a mature person looks at somebody and says, you're a complex person, I'm a complex person, this issue is complex. Therefore, we need to be really intentional and sensitive and just reasonable when we make like hardline stances. So for example, Target came out in the last week or early this week in supporting same-sex marriage. Immediately, a organization that is for the traditional definition of marriage came out announcing a Target boycott. Okay? And some people are like, yeah, we should boycott them. But we got to realize that some CEO, some group of investors, a board, made that decision for Target. And that every single person that walks into a Target is not supporting same-sex marriage. Every single person that works for Target is not supporting, coming out, waving the rainbow flag and supporting same-sex marriage, okay? Is way more complex than that. So when we just come out with these blankets and say, we're going to boycott you, what we're saying is we're against you. We're against having anything to do with you and anyone who has anything to do with you. So immediately, we're coming out and we're being against all those people when the gospel says, no, we're for people. We're for everybody. The scandal of Christianity is not who's not allowed in. It's the fact that everybody's allowed. It's the fact that everybody gets to come. It's the fact that the gospel is open to every single person. That God loves everyone. That's the standard. And so, when we get caught up, when we make people their issues, and when we don't sit down and think, wait a minute, this person isn't just their issues, or isn't just this one issue, they're way more complex than that. And God has a heart for this person, regardless of whatever their stances on certain issues may be. All right, when we just come against people and we start to identify them solely by these single issues that we're probably falling in love with angry Jesus. All right, and I would say that's an illegitimate representation of Christ. Does that make sense? I'm trying to be careful on how I describe this. You're all kind of tracking with that one? Yeah? Awesome. All right. The fourth one, Bible passages only apply to other people. Bible passages only apply to other people. So, for example, you're reading through Ephesians, and you get to chapter 6, and it's talking about children, obey your parents, for this is right. And you're like, yeah. Then it gets down, verse 3, and it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. And you're like, that's right, Mom and Dad. You need to read that verse. We're going to have family Bible study time, and we're just going to look at that verse. Okay? You are provoking me to anger. But you skip over the first verse that is, obey your parents, for this is right. And you totally lose sight of that. Or when you read verses about at the end of Ephesians chapter 4, when it says that we need to forgive people who wrong us, we need to be tender-hearted toward each other, we need to show people grace. And you're like, yeah, the person who's holding a grudge against me, you better do some forgiving there, but we're still holding on to our grudges against other people. All right? When you read Bible passages, you immediately think of other people they apply to, and you don't check yourself first, you might be in love with angry Jesus. And that's an easy one to fall into, because it's way easier than just going, you need to read that verse again, other than be like, I need to read that verse again. All right? Know what makes sense? Yeah? Second? All right, guys, we're like, all right, so 4 little easy things. The first one is a little ridiculous. I don't think anybody just wants to read the Bible passages in the Bible. If you do, well, I need a little more serious help. But the other 3, it's kind of easy to unintentionally fall into that. Those kind of creep in, and you not realize it. And so it's good to kind of wade through those and ask the Holy Spirit, hey, is this kind of present in my life? If it is, let's get rid of it. Let's deal with it. All right, now, we're going to go back to our angry Jesus passages, okay? We're going to kind of make sense of them and realize that Jesus isn't just angry here, okay? This isn't just Jesus has gone into a manic rage and he needs to take some antidepressants and he'll be okay, all right? The issue is a little more complex here. So, going back to Matthew 21, we get the cursing of the fig tree, okay? So, in verse 19, verse 18, we got to put this in its context to make sense of it, because you read it and you're like, what kind of spiritual application I could take from this, right? Like, if I see stuff that doesn't do what it's supposed to, I can curse it and make it wither and die. That's not an application to take, by the way. All right, so this is in the context of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. He comes into Jerusalem, and it's Passover. Everybody's celebrating, but he walks into the temple, and just like at the beginning of his ministry, all the money changers and all that stuff has come back in. Okay, so the temple's just like it was. It's full of all the stuff that doesn't need to be there. And then all the Pharisees and the scribes, they're the professional religious people. They're like the ministers of that time period, are constantly just calling people out, telling people what they're not doing right. They're putting all these heavy burdens on people, saying, you got to do this, and 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 you got to do this. And God's not going to love you. He's not going to bless you. And so you got to measure up when they weren't even measuring up to that standard. So Jesus is not just angry at a fig tree. What he sees is an awesome object lesson. Okay? So Jesus gave a giant object lesson to his disciples. Okay, because the 12 were with him. So he gave them a giant object lesson. And Mark records the cursing of the fig tree too, and Mark adds this little detail. He says that it wasn't the season for figs. And when Matthew says there were only leaves on the tree, that gives us a clue. Alright, so Mark says it wasn't the season for figs, and so you're like, that just makes Jesus angrier? Because there's not supposed to be any figs on there, and he's still mad. Like, maybe he just doesn't know about fig trees, right? But I actually have had a fig tree in my backyard at one of the houses I went in Macon. And it was a sad fig tree. But it grew figs, but when it's not the season for figs, okay, there's not just leaves, there's little buds on the tree. And you can actually eat those. They don't taste that great, but you can eat them. Okay, they're not full figs, but they're there, you can eat them. If it's a fruit-bearing tree. Now this tree wasn't, but it still had leaves, so it looked nice. It looked the part. It looked like a healthy tree, but it wasn't a healthy tree at all. And so Jesus is giving his disciples this object lesson of, hey, you may look good on the outside. You can wear the right clothes, you can say the right things, you can act the right way, but if your heart isn't right with God, this is what you're really like. And so that's what's really going on with the cursing of the fig tree. It's not just a manic rage. It's not just a sudden spurt of emotion. He's like, I need to curse something. I don't think it's a fig tree. It's that he's giving them an object lesson because they would have understood what was going on here. And so that's why he's cursing the fig tree, not because. So it's more than just anger. It's Jesus is using this as a teaching moment. And he's taking a tree that's already sick. Right? This tree is not bearing fruit. That means it's a sick tree. And it's not going to bear fruit unless some major changes happen. And so, for those of you who are concerned about the tree, you're like, that poor tree. It wasn't going to make it anyway, guys. Okay? So, you don't need to be as concerned about the tree. So that's kind of the explanation of why Jesus cursed the fig tree. So there's more going on. Does that make sense? Yeah?
No.
Yeah? Alright, this means yes, this means no, and this means maybe. Okay?
Yeah.
There you go. I just made myself a little busy doing maybe. Alright. Go into John chapter 2 passage. Alright, so Jesus, beginning his ministry, he's cleansing the temple. He's making his whip. Okay? Now this is, alright, so the Jewish temple wasn't like our church where we've got one sanctuary for everybody. Okay? It had all these different courts that were sectioned off. Okay? Ladies, y'all could only go so far into the temple. Sorry. And you couldn't worship with men. So you would be segregated. Okay? Jewish men could get in the furthest, and then they had like the Holy of Holies there. But outside of the court of the women was the court of the Gentiles, okay, for the non-Jews. These were people who wanted to worship God, but were not Jewish. Court of the Gentiles. That's where everybody set up their booths. That's where everybody brought in all the cows and the sheep, had all the birds, had all the money. And so it's not just that people could be ripping people off and taking advantage of people who are traveling and charging them exorbitant rates. It's that literally, if you're not a Jew, you have nowhere to worship. You can't go to the temple and pray. And at this time, they understood that God's presence was literally in the Holy of Holies, in the temple. So this was their access point to God. And so what they were doing is they're actually keeping people away from God because they had filled the only space available to those people with animals and booths selling stuff and birds, and they'd made complete chaos. So Jesus wasn't like, you need to come into the prophets, or I just don't like you, or these animals are pooping everywhere like that guy did in the middle of the hallway in high school, or did you miss that story? Anyway, it wasn't just about that. It was that Jesus was saying, hey, everybody gets access to God. Okay? And so it's everyone should get access to God. Everyone should get access to God. That was the point. That's what Jesus, that's why he got so angry, because he's saying, hey, listen, the whole reason I'm here, the whole reason that God has come to earth This is everyone gets access. Everybody gets a chance. Everybody has the same opportunity to respond, and you are keeping people from that. That's what is behind that. Not just, he wasn't on his meds that day. All right, the woes, Matthew 23. All right, now when we get into the woes, Matthew 23 is obviously after Matthew chapter 21, right? Okay, so we know that Matthew chapter 21, Jesus' last week of ministry, right? Triumphal entry, all that's happened. So this is, Jesus' ministry, how long? How long did it last?
3 years.
How long?
3 years.
3 years. 3 to 4 years. Okay, there's actually some debate amongst the scholars. Okay, a very small minority would say it was only 2, but they're kind of like, those weirdos. And so 3 to 4 years. Okay, so this is the very end of Jesus' ministry. All right, so when he pronounces all this stuff against these guys, it's not just out of the blue. It's not, this is the first time I've seen anything. It's that Jesus has been watching these people get it wrong over and over again. It's not just that they were wrong, it's that they were oppressing people with their wrongness. It's that they were keeping people from God, and this is Jesus' one of his last opportunities to speak some truth, and so he does. He does it boldly. From a position of authority, right? If anyone could call these guys out, Jesus could. Yeah? So it wasn't, like me rolling up into the senior adult Sunday school class and be like, this is all the stuff that's wrong with you guys. It would be like, Charles Stanley. You know who Charles Stanley is? He's like an epic preacher dude. He's in his 80s. He's awesome. He's been doing it forever. Rolling in and telling them, hey guys, we need to get some things right. And they would respect. They love Charles Stanley, so they would totally respect him. Okay? So he was in the right position. He had waited a long time, observed a lot, so he knew what he was talking about. Okay? So, our thing is that Jesus gave this message at the very end of his ministry. He gave it at the very end of his ministry. So it's not just he's flying off the handle. It's that, hey, this has been building, and it was necessary. It was necessary for him to speak the truth with authority and boldness and conviction at this point. So it wasn't just about anger. Okay? It wasn't just about anger. Alright, now, when I was thinking about talking about angry Jesus and talking about Jesus is always, we could also call him like against Jesus whenever people, like the Westboro Baptist people who go and like picket people's funerals and stuff. Like that's just, like we all know that like that's just not right. Like that's not, Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus doesn't just hate on people. Alright, Jesus doesn't tell us to make signs and say God hates. That's just not Jesus. At all. So I was really thinking about what's our takeaway? How can we take away from this? So, if y'all all turn to Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. You hit Philemon, it's next. Alright, Hebrews chapter 1, we're going to look at verse 3a. Okay, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3a. That means the first part of verse 3. So it says that the Son, that's Jesus, radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God. The Son radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God. All right, so when we think about Jesus, we need to think about this. Hebrews 1, 3a. That's your takeaway. When we think about Jesus, it's not a big case. But that's what we need to think about. We need to think about this. That the Son radiates God's own glory, expresses the very character of God. Notice when we look at Jesus, it's Hebrews 1, verse 3.
Can you say what you said right now?
Hey, Hebrews.
No. That's the right now.
Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. Okay.
No, you just said it.
Hey, Yeah, that's what the blank is.
But what is in the verse we write down?
Oh, you don't have to write down what the verse says. The sun radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God.
Sorry, I was just tripping.
Stealing is great. All right. So, boiled down, this is Jesus. Okay, he is the exact representation, the image. He's God. Okay, so when we see Jesus, we're looking at God. We're not looking at just a man. We're not looking at someone who's only defined by one characteristic. So when we separate Jesus out and we just make him, like tree hugger Jesus or Democrat Jesus, or we give him some kind of agenda, what we're doing is we're not talking about Jesus at all. Because Jesus he radiates God's glory. He is God's very nature and character. So when we want to know what God's like, we look at Christ. And so my challenge to us is to look at Christ through that lens and make sure this week we're checking our hearts and we're not making him after our own image to serve our own purposes. Right? One of the favorite Jesus is therapy Jesus. The only reason Jesus exists is to make you feel better about yourself. Right? Jesus will save you from your sins. He'll make you happy. He'll give you everything you want. A lot of times we boil the gospel down to that. And yeah, Jesus wants to fix stuff in you, and he doesn't want you to walk around being miserable all the time. But that's not why he died on the cross. Okay, that's not why he rose from the dead. Right? Jesus is showing us this is who God is. He's showing us the totality of God's character. He's showing us this is God's glory. When you think about God, look at me. And so this week, as you're doing your devos, as you're having your prayer time, as you're thinking about what God wants to do with your life, think about, do I have a proper image of Christ in my head? Do I think about Jesus the right way? Or do I just boil him down into an agenda Jesus, or some neat little kind of dude who fixes all my problems, or who's there for me, or looks kind of like I do? Okay, so that's our big takeaway. So Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3a is a great verse to kind of meditate on and ask the Holy Spirit to help renew our minds so that's how we view Christ. Cool?